Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we return to my interview with Julian Assange, the founder of Wikileaks. The New York Times says it consulted with the White House, showed them the documents to redact whatever would endanger people, sources on the ground. How have you, or I should say, Julian Assange, have you communicated with the White House at this point?
Well, there's quite some disingenuous messages coming out of the White House in relation to the lead-up to publication. Our media team didn't want to all be stepping on each other's toes, so we selected the New York Times to be the group that would approach the White House and try and get what their statement was on the matter. That said, there is a bit of a difference between how the Times and the Washington Post was involved in this issue, but how the American press tends to deal with government agencies prior to publication, and the standards that we have and the standards that the European press has. We don't see that an organization that is we don't see, in the case of a story where an organization has engaged in some kind of abusive conduct and that story has been revealed, that it has a right to know the story before the public, a right to know the story before the victims. Because we know that what happens in practice is that is just extra lead time to spin the story. And we see some sort of pathetic attempts by the White House to engage in a bit of spin about whether we contact them or not. In fact, we did contact them through the New York Times as a coalition.
And they praised the New York Times.
Yes, they praised the New York Times. I mean, you have to understand the New York Times is a mainstream organization, and it does work within particular milieu and particular constraints that appear to be present, but we're not totally happy about the way that the Times has sort of defensively written. That does seem a little bit unprofessional. So as an example, the New York Times stated that it chose not to link to our website. I mean, it is just ridiculous. The public can see that and Google it if they want. If the New York Times, for whatever reason, wants to not link to Wikileaks for some defensive politics, then it can do that, and it's perfectly entitled to. But to deliberately say that has been avoided smacks of unprofessional conduct to me. Now, it doesn't mean it's been approved by the editor to do that, but it does seem to be quite pusillanimous to be engaging in that kind of defensive conduct instead of pursuing the real meat of the story.
But it is Wikileaks that reached out to these three news organizations, Guardian, Der Spiegel, and the New York Times, to release simultaneously on Sunday these secret documents. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Our promise to our sources that we will try and get the maximum possible impact for their material. And we could see that this was an issue where we could actually pull together a coalition of both influential media organizations and media organizations which have the capacity to engage in some research. That in itself, that's an unusual collaboration to have brought together these four groups, have them exchanging research data, and all agree on the same publication timeline.
Julian Assange, you mentioned your sources. Who are your sources?
Well, obviously we can't say as an organization that specializes in source protection. We are also obligated under the Swedish Constitution's right to anonymity to not reveal our sources. Revealing our sources is in fact a criminal offence in Sweden, and also that holds for our contractors and computer programmers. Now, that said, we can see that the material did come from the United States government somewhere. And that's obvious from some of the other material that we've put out over the years. It's one of the hopeful things about these sort of publications is that it's not just us exposing abuses of war. It's not just us exposing corruption in Africa. Rather, it is insiders who are men or women of good conscience who are deciding to help expose the situation because they want their own organizations to be reformed. So they're good people within the United States government and supportive of us and our ideals. And those people step forward to make events like this a reality. I remember we have put in a lot of work into this, and we have had some legal and surveillance difficulties in the past few months, but the real heroes behind this material is, of course, our sources.
The Pentagon has announced it is starting a criminal investigation to find your sources. Your response to that?
Yes. We are concerned that the United States has not announced that it is going to conduct criminal investigations into the large number of previously undisclosed civilian casualty events that are revealed by this material. Why is it that an investigation is announced to go into the source before an investigation is announced to deal with the potentially criminal conduct that is revealed by this material? The rest of the world is taking note. It's 14 pages in Monday's Guardian newspaper. Nearly more than 1/3 of the entire paper dedicated to this issue. 17 pages in Der Spiegel, the most influential publication in Germany. So Europe is certainly taking note of the tenor that is coming out of the White House and to concrete reactions coming out of this material. It's clear what the European population wants to see, and hopefully that's also what the US population wants to see, which is a clear response to deal with the problems that are occurring in Afghanistan, not a clear response to try and stifle or cover up further allegations of abuse.
Julian Assange, in a memo, a U.S. government secret memo that Wikileaks posted in March, marked unauthorized disclosure subject to criminal sanctions. It concludes, quote, WikiLeaks.org represents a potential force protection, counterintelligence, OPSEC, and InfoSec threat to the U.S. Army, or in plain English, a threat to Army operations and information. Can you respond to this?
Yeah. Well, this was a 2008 counterintelligence analysis of us by the U.S. Army. Now, some 32 pages, and these initial headers you don't need to worry about. In order for a counterintelligence agent to be writing a report, analyst to be writing a report about anything, they have to justify why they are writing a report with language like that, and the same with the conclusions. Now, what is more interesting about that report is the middle. It says that it recommends that we be attacked by destroying our center of gravity. That is the trust that confidential sources have in us and the trust that the public has in the integrity of the material that we release. It goes on to explain examples of why we maybe should be attacked. And those examples are examples which have embarrassed the US military. Revelations of abuses at Guantanamo Bay, abuses in Fallujah, and potential illegal use of small chemical weapons in Iraq. Now, it says that one of the ways of attacking that center of gravity is by publicly prosecuting whistleblowers. It even uses that word, whistleblower, not US military personnel or other personnel who are engaging in irresponsible leaking, but rather whistleblowers, people who are blowing the whistle on abuse. Now, we don't know whether the recommendations of that report were treated